Hey dancers, welcome back. As promised, today we are looking at a few hip strength exercises to help improve our turnout. Now when it comes to improving turnout, there are some factors that we have little to no control over, like the depth of our hip sockets, the angle of our femurs, our overall bone structure, ligament laxity. There are so many factors that play into how much range we have available in turnout, and it also changes in different positions. So you might not love your first or fifth position, but you can get a nice passe or vice versa. So you don't need 180-degree turnout, and in fact we have research that most dancers, including professionals and students training at a high level, don't have this 180-degree turnout that we've been told is the standard that is needed to succeed in ballet. One study from the Australian Ballet found that their dancers had an average of, I think it was 133 degrees turnout. So we're talking about dancers in one of the best companies in the world who don't even have that range, but are obviously beautiful, talented, well-trained performers. So my encouragement to dancers is, instead of comparing yourself to dancers that you see online or even in your classes in real life, focus on your own body, your own progress, and how you can learn to make the most of what you have. Because like I said, there are some factors that we can't change or control, but there are a lot of things like our active range of motion, our strength, our control, that we can change and influence for the better. And I think that's how we can find joy in the process, instead of constantly wishing we were somewhere else or had someone else's body. With all of that said, let's get into it. In the previous video, we looked at a few dynamic stretches that we can include at the start of our session to get our hips warmed up. So you can use that before class or before some of these strength movements that we'll be doing today. The equipment is optional, but I encourage it as you're progressing so we can add resistance. For that, you'll need some dumbbells and a resistance band, and possibly something like a yoga block, a weight plate, or any short-ish surface that you can use to elevate your foot. Our first exercise is going to be the curtsy squat, also sometimes known as the curtsy lunge. That's my power going on. You might be familiar with this. We step to the side, then our other leg is going to extend to the corner behind us into a lunge. So we're focusing on loading up this glute. So try not to transfer too much of your weight onto that back leg. It's going to feel very awkward. So this back leg is more so providing balance and support while we're looking to squat and load this front hip. So you can either do reps where you're staying in one place, going up and down, or you can do that transfer each time, where you step back and come back up, step back and lift. What I like about this one is we're getting a nice range of motion, so a nice stretch through these glutes, the lateral hip muscles, while also working on our strength. So we're going to look at about 3 sets of 10 reps. Once that feels easy with body weight, you can grab your dumbbells either at your shoulders or by your side, or something like a kettlebell, whatever you want to use to add resistance. If you're training at home, you can grab a backpack, fill it with books. If you want to get even more into that mobility aspect, we are going to grab a block, or like I said, anything else to elevate your foot. So this would now be a deficit curtsy squat. If you can, I would rather go with something like a weight plate that is going to offer a bit more stability, as opposed to the foam blocks that can sometimes make that balance a bit more tricky. But if this is all that you have, we can make it work. So it's the exact same thing, stepping back, but now we're really getting into that stretch. So we step it back, loading up the glutes, and come up. Step it back and lift. Back and lift. And here, you don't have to worry too much that your knees are tracking exactly over your toes. It's not like a regular lunge in the sagittal plane where we're going front to back. There is some rotation happening. So kind of trust your body in this movement, as long as you're getting most of the work through this front glute. So you don't want to be sinking into that back leg or transferring your weight that way too much. It's all about that front leg getting nice and strong. So that is our first exercise, and one of my favorites. Next up, grab your band. We're going to look at the clamshell. Let's level it up a bit. I think most of us in the dance community will be familiar with the clamshell position, but if you're not, our feet are in line with our glutes, knees bent, and from here all that we typically do is lift our top leg. You can be upright or lying on your side, it's not going to make a massive difference. So this is our basic clamshell. Here we want to make sure that our hips are stacked on top of one another. So you're welcome to start here, but for those of us who have been doing this for a while, I think we're ready to take it a step further. We're going to take this into a side bridge. So actually lifting our hips, and then we hold and perform the clamshell from there. Now, if holding it at the top feels like too much, you're welcome to come down in between. So we lift, perform maybe 1 or 2 reps, then we come down and repeat. Otherwise, if we can, we hold it at the top and perform the clamshell from there. So this is really great because we're loading this bottom hip, great for our supporting side strength, that gluteus medius in particular, but then also training the rotators through that top leg. And if you wanted to, you can also start that without the band, so just doing the side bridge and lifting that top leg, and then as you get stronger, grab your band, and of course we can increase the resistance of the band over time if it starts getting too easy. For this, I would aim for about 10 to 12 reps over 2 to 3 sets. So if you're just starting out, maybe you start at 2 sets and then add that 3rd set in a couple of weeks once you're ready. So far, we've targeted strength for our glutes, some quads with that curtsy squat, more of our lateral hip muscles, some of those deep hip rotators. One big muscle group that's still missing is the hamstrings. Now, there's many ways we can target the hamstrings, and hopefully if you're watching this, you already have a solid strength training routine in place where you have movements like squats, lunges, deadlifts, hip thrust, some of those big compound moves in your weekly training, because that is the foundation for everything that we do, and that's where we want to start before we start adding more of these specific exercises. If you're not there yet, you're confused about what that means or how to get started, I'm going to link my strength training program in the description. It's called Foundational Strength for Dancers and is exactly what it sounds like. It's about getting you set up with the foundation of training principles, movement patterns, all the basics of resistance training, so you can really get the most out of your exercise programming. Because without those basics, the rest of what we're doing is just not going to be as effective. But for now, bringing it back to our hamstrings, how can we incorporate a bit more of that? From there, I'm going to grab my band again, tie it around my ankles, and come into my 4-point kneeling position. From there, I'm going to grab the band with one foot and try and press it up to the ceiling, keeping my knee bent and making sure that I'm not arching in the back or using my pelvis more than the actual movement of the hip. So we press it up and down, up and down. The heavier the resistance on your band, the more challenging this will be. Of course, we'll repeat that both sides. Compared to something like a loaded deadlift, this one is pretty low resistance. So again, I would not have it be the only hamstring strengthening you're relying on. But for the context of our turnout workout, if you're using a band that's heavy enough, it is a helpful variation to include. I do about 10 reps over 2 to 3 sets. Another variation, again, this is body weight, so not the most challenging, but can be helpful, is going to be our heel squeeze prone. If you've done Pilates, you might be familiar with this. We're going to lie down on our stomach. So you can rest your head down. I'm just keeping mine lifted for the sake of the microphone. Our legs are bent to 90 degrees. From there, I'm going to take my knees slightly out to the side and put my heels together so they're kind of forming a diamond shape. Our first level is just going to be to squeeze and release our heels. So we squeeze our heels and release. Squeeze and release. Once that feels too easy, we're going to squeeze, try and lift our legs off the mat and bring it back down. So we squeeze, lift, release. Squeeze, lift, release. So this is a nice way to try and get a bit more into some of those deeper hip muscles. Again, not the only strength one we need, but can be a nice addition. So those are a few exercises for our general strength. Looking at some of the big muscle groups that contribute to our turnout. And I mentioned this, it might have been an Instagram post, but turnout is not only about our actual turnout muscles, so the main muscles that contribute to that external rotation of the hip is going to be our glute max, gluteus maximus, if you want to say the whole thing. And then we have 6 deep external rotator muscles that are smaller, but sit quite deep in the hip and contribute to that external rotation. And then we have a few other muscles where some of their fibers will contribute to turnout, but not as much as these two main groups. So while those are our turnout muscles, we don't just stand in first position for the whole class. We are taking our leg to the front, to the side, to the back. Sometimes the knee is bent, sometimes it's extended. So for each of those positions, we are using different muscles of the hips and thighs that we also need to be strong and flexible so that we can make the most of our turnout while we're dancing. For instance, while my hip flexors don't do much to help turn out that leg, if they're not strong, I'm not going to be able to lift my leg to the front for my développés, my attitude, even my passés, my grand battement, and the way that translates into so many movements in the center. So it's really important that we take a holistic and comprehensive approach and not just focus on isolating one muscle or muscle group. Now that we've targeted some of these big muscles, in the next video, we are going to look at some end range strengthening and a few stretches. So we have all of these layers, all of these building blocks, hitting all the different areas that are needed to help us fully develop our turnout. I hope you found this helpful. Make sure that you are subscribed and let me know if you have any questions or any future video requests. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you back here soon.